Hi, my name is Jeannie Sweeney, and today I will be presenting my LDT Capstone on Blended Learning in a 3 through 5 ELA classroom for the University of Houston Masters of Education program. I am currently an instructional coach in KDISC. This is my first year in this role. Prior to becoming an instructional coach, I had spent 12 years in the classroom. 7 of those were self-contained in 4th grade, and the last 5 of those years I was departmentalized, focusing on ELA and social studies instruction. As we go forth, I would like to present this agenda. We will start with an overview as well as going over the items that compose my capstone as well as my reflection on this journey. As I was coming up with a focus for my capstone early in my master's studies, I thought about where I was in that moment. I was teaching 4th grade at Bethke Elementary, and as I thought about a problem, I immediately came up with one I knew that was present in my current classroom. I only had about 60 minutes for writing instruction, and that was with each portion of my blocks. I also had to cover several other subjects in that time, so writing was often a very, very short time. I didn't have as much time as I wanted to confer with my students. Sometimes I would try to meet with maybe a handful of learners each day, but by the end of the week, I would find myself noticing that I didn't meet with a couple of students and would try to prioritize those the following week. And I was always running into not having enough time to be able to go over students' compositions or their work in grammar and conventions. And I really wanted to meet the needs of all my learners while also maximizing my capacity. As each year has gone by in education, it seems like we have much less time, especially when we are met with having assessments and also just time that students might not be in the classroom due to interventions or due to absences. In thinking about this problem, I thought about the technology that had been presented to us during COVID learning the previous year. We used Canvas on my campus, and I thought, what better way than to infuse elements of online learning with my face-to-face students so they could have a more independent, self-guided journey in their learning. My capstone project goal was to provide an action plan for a 3 through 5 ELA classroom that's centered in instructional design and use of technological resources. My objective is to present various components of planning for a unit of learning that transforms a traditional face-to-face setting into a blended environment. This would invite opportunities for teachers to differentiate for their learners, as well as for their teacher-student conferring when writing. My literature review was focused on blended learning in a 3 through 5 ELA classroom, and there were several elements that struck out to me as I worked on my research in this paper. One was academic gain and achievement. What was found in my research is that students showed gains across various subpopulations, more specifically English language learners. These were students that gained further due to the differentiated that was offered in a blended learning setting. While gains were seen larger in the primary grades, after 3rd grade, the growth was marginal at best. In a study that was presented by Prescott, Bunch, Katzkoff, and Maracuso. They attributed that this is most likely to the fact that there is a change in focus, often making it more challenging to accelerate reading skills as students in later grades, which may explain in part the lower gains seen in third grade through fifth grade. This change is, of course, the shift of reading instruction going from learning how to read, but instead reading to learn. I also identified some best practices and strategies. It was often found that teachers in high growth classrooms often demonstrated strengths in three key areas: demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness, using assessment and instruction, and engaging students in learning, according to Anthony in 2019. There were also some advantages and disadvantages. The advantages included student-centered learning that allowed for differentiation and supports for special populations such as GT, English learners in special education. Special considerations should be made to classroom sizes, time frame, or interventions. Classroom size that is more than 50 can be very cumbersome and difficult to track all the students' work and conferring. It would be very surface level at best. The time frame shouldn't exceed any longer than 8 weeks for interventions. Any shorter than 6 weeks doesn't provide enough time for a student to master a skill. Anything longer than 8 weeks often becomes very convoluted. As I was going through my literature review, I noticed that there were an absence of articles on writing and grammar. The bulk of the articles focused only on reading instruction. My instructional design document for the blended learning in this classroom setting was using revising and editing with Google Forms. What my goal was that upon successful completion of this instruction, learners in my fourth grade classroom will reflect on their writing using teacher-produced checklists on Google Forms as they make revisions and edits to their stories with fidelity and an opportunity to show proof of their changes. I conducted learning interviews with students in my class who needed extensive feedback, as well as ELA colleagues and my instructional coach. Students could identify what to look for on revising and editing, but we noticed that there was a disconnect between that and editing their own or their peers' papers. I trialed my Google Forms with my instructional coach, as well as two target learners for my homeroom. One target learner was a student who performed above grade level and could easily maneuver around in his work, while my other target learner was a student who would often come to me as we were working on a composition to check in on nearly every paragraph to ask me, does this look good? Does this look great? And so I really wanted the Google Forms to be a way for students to inquire further, and I could easily see their their work and their efforts in front of me without having to pull notebook after notebook and take away more classroom time that could be met with students in small group. My evaluation included 21 learners in my afternoon block. I selectively chose this block due to the wide variety of student population groups. My students enjoyed the ease of the form. They were very excited to see that they could provide their feedback as well as show that they did, in fact, edit their compositions prior to publishing, and it gave them a chance to ask me questions specifically about their composition that I could easily pull them and confer with them in a mini conference. This was a Google form that I use for revising and editing. It asked students if they had made sure that their paragraphs were edited, that they had read their composition forward as well as backwards. The backwards trick is for students to focus on just errors in spelling instead of the flow of the paper. They would read from beginning to end to notice the flow, as well as share that they have met with other peers in their classroom to share their composition prior to the publishing phase. I use this student feedback form to gather their ideas, thoughts, and feedback. Again, they were very pleased to share their feedback and also be open. I had one student had said, maybe you don't need to include the fact that I had read my paper to a partner because I had already done so, which I did find to be pretty humorous, but at the same time, they felt comfortable enough to share their feedback with me in their writing. Some multimedia that I had completed in my online tools for learning included a Nearpod presentation of writing a first draft. This gave a step-by-step on what a student should be looking for in terms of creating their composition, by planning their composition and the different components of the essay. I then also created a revision and editing lesson using a strategy called ARMS, where a student would add, remove, move, or substitute sentences and words within a composition. This could be something that can be pushed to an online platform such as Canvas, as well as a Nearpod beforehand. Finally, one last item for this was a play post-it, which was on narrative versus expository compositions. It is a survey to gather prior knowledge and exposure to the types of writing that exist, and also gives the student an opportunity to learn further about narrative and expository compositions if they have little to no prior experience. In closing, I really enjoyed creating the products for my capstone as I worked on my master's. I have also had a shift in my career in the middle of this master's journey, and I'm noticing the greater impact it has on instructional planning. These are some items that I can share as ideas for my teachers if they encounter any issues when it comes to being able to meet with their students due to time constraints or the amount of students in our classrooms. This has given me a larger glimpse into planning for instruction and as I go into my next stage in my career. I appreciated the guidance from the Learning Design and Technology program. I took a bulk of my classes with Dr. Dogan and also had several classes with Dr. Browers and wrapping up my career with Dr. Gronseth. So I appreciate everything that I have learned in this program. I feel like it has made me a more thoughtful and reflective instructor, and I can't wait to continue to use the skills and techniques that I have gained in this program. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.